Okay, Parsha illuminated for Parshas Vayechi. So I think we have an interesting shir, that's for sure, for today. Um, Exploring it, we're going to explore something that is controversial and difficult, and that is the topic of Reuven. So Yaakov, as the end of his life is approaching, he gathers his sons together and he gives them either a bracha or a blessing or a rebuke or both. And the Torah actually at the end of all the blessings calls them all blessings. It says he blessed them all, and then the commentaries have to deal with, well, some of them don't seem like blessings, they just seem like rebukes. And one of those is what he says to Reuven. So Reuven is his oldest son, and therefore Reuven is the one who he addresses first. And this is what he says to Reuven, chapter 49, verse 3, Parak Memtes Pasuk Gimel, Reuven Bechoriata. Reuven, you are my Bechor, you are my firstborn. Kochi Vireshisoni. My strength and the first of my might. Yeser se'es v'yeser az. You're superior in se'es. Here they translate as rank. Yeser az, superior in power. Pachaz kamayim al tosar. Here they translate, you have the restlessness of water. Al tosar, you will not continue to have those things mentioned before. Ki alisa mishkevei avicha, for you ascended upon your father's, here they translate as couch, mishkevei avicha, as chilalta yitzui Allah. Then you profaned yitzui Allah. Again, yitzui is like the sheets or the bedding of Allah. And here they translate him who ascended upon my bed. And all the blessings are poetic and difficult to parse just on a simple level. So we have to try to understand, what is it that Yaakov is telling Reuven? What is he talking about? What is he referring to? And to understand, we'll begin with Rashi. So Rashi says that we don't have all the Rashis here. I'll just tell you, when he says Reuven bechori ata, Reuven, you are my firstborn, because Reuven was the firstborn. And he tells him, Kochi Vireshisoni, you're my strength and the first of my might. Rashi says what that means is that you were the first, this was the first time that when Yaakov impregnated Leah with Reuven the firstborn, Leah was his first wife, and it was the first time that he had any seminal emission in his entire life, which is the mark of a great tzaddik, a very righteous person. He was Reishis, the first of my strength. In Hebrew, we call it's called Keri. He never saw Keri. He never had any mission. And actually, where did I see? The Paneach Raza, one of the later Rishonim, I think, who is into gematrias and stuff, he points out the gematria, the numerical value of Kochi Vereshis Oni equals Shelo Ra'a Yaakov Keri. That Yaakov never had any mission, seminal emission that was not in the context of relations with his wife. In another place, he says it's also the gematria of Shelo Ra'a Keri Le'olam. He never saw Keri. So again, the same idea. It's hinted to in the gematria. That's what he meant. He was the first of my might. He was the product of Yaakov's first time not just having relations, but ever having a seminal emission. Fine. Then he goes on and he says, Yeser se'es v'yeser az. Yeser se'es, you were fit to, yeser means more, to increased. Here they translate superior. In se'es, in being elevated, being lifted up, meaning you were fit to be elevated to be the Kohen. Reuven, the firstborn son, you're the firstborn. You were originally deemed that you would be the one who the Kohanim would come from, the priests would come from. And Yeser Az, you were to be of superior strength. Rashi explains again that you were to be the one from whom the kings come from, Malchus. So Reuven, as the firstborn, had everything lined up for him, that he would not only be the leader, he would not only be the leader, the kings would come from him, even the priests would come from him, everything would come from Reuven as the firstborn. But that was not to be. Why not? Because pachaz kamayim al tosar, because you were impulsive, you were restless like water, and therefore al tosar, you won't continue to have these extras. And where was he impulsive? Ki alisa mishkevei avicha, because he ascended upon his father's couch, literal translation, as chilata yitzui Allah, and he profaned the bedding upon whom he ascended, excuse me, which we'll see what that refers to momentarily. So he did something with his father's bedding. And Rashi tells us that it's a reference who was upon the bed of Yaakov, the Shechina, God's presence, and he profaned God's presence through his actions. And because of this, he lost his opportunity to lead as both the king of the brothers of Israel, and that the kings would descend from him, and that the priests would descend from him. Okay, so to properly understand, actually, I'll just mention one other thing. In Divrei Hayamim, the book of Chronicles, book 1, chapter 5, verse 1, it says, when recounting, again, the descendants of Yaakov, it says, Uvnei Reuven b'chor Yisrael. It says the children of Reuven were the following. It's about to say who they were, but then it interjects and it says that we're calling him the Bechor, we're calling him the firstborn, ki hu ha-Bechor, because he was the Bechor, he was the firstborn, uv'chalo yitzui aviv, and when he profaned the bedding of his father, nitna Bechorasa livnei Yosef, his Bechor, his firstborn rights were given to the children of Yosef, and he lost it. So actually he's losing three things here, because he's losing the firstborn rights, he's losing the kahuna, the priesthood, and he's losing malchus, kingship. What do we mean by that? So what's left, actually, if not priesthood and kingship for the firstborn, what's left is a double portion. A double portion. Who gets a double portion? Yosef gets a double portion, because Yosef has, instead of getting one portion in the land of Israel, each of his sons, Ephraim and Manasseh, each get a portion in the land of Israel. So Yosef is actually the one who gets a double portion. It's fitting that Yosef should, because Yosef is the firstborn to Rachel, who was really supposed to be the first wife of Yaakov. In a certain sense, Yosef was supposed to be the firstborn. And that's how the commentaries explain kind of how this could be permitted to take the firstborn rights and transfer it to Yosef. So Yosef gets the double portion. We know that Yehuda ends up with the kingship. The kings descend from Yehuda, and Levi ends up with the priesthood, that the Kohanim descend from Levi. Okay, Menachem, you want to say something or ask them?
Yeah, I had a question about the kahuna. I noticed that it mentioned, raising the hands and that kind of thing. Who had the kahuna before Yaakov? I mean, was Avraham a Kohen? Were they, and before that, how did that come down to them?
So it's a great question. It's kind of unclear what it means at this point to have a Kohen, because we know first of all that when Esav gets rid of the firstborn rights to Yaakov, one of his concerns is, I think Rashi quotes it as, I don't want to be a Kohen. It's risky to be a Kohen. It's a difficult task, and the person could be killed for doing the wrong thing. So
Hmm.
Esav kind of leaves it to Yaakov. I think at that point, before you have Shvatim, though, you don't have these specific roles. Part of what happens in this week's Parsha is the Shvatim, the brothers, each get their assignment and their role. And until then, there's not a nation yet really to have these different roles. So I'm not sure if it's relevant even at this time because we don't have a Mishkan, we don't have a base of Mikdash, there's no temple yet for it to be relevant. Um, but it's going to be relevant in the future. So
But, but it was given to Yehuda.
Yehuda gets the kingship and Levi gets the priesthood. And this is again, it's for their
And
descendants.
Levi
That's
gets the priesthood.
really
Right.
where it will be most relevant.
Thank you.
Okay. So to really understand what is going on in this rebuke that Yaakov gives to Reuven, we have to go back to Parshas Vayishlach, and we're going to spend a few minutes. It's going to be a Parshas Vayishlach class also. We have to go back to Parshas Vayishlach, chapter 35, Perek Lamed Hey, and over there the Torah tells us in verse 22, Vayehi bishkom Yisrael ba'aretz. It was when Yisrael, meaning Yaakov, was dwelling in the land. So this is when Yaakov is kind of making his way slowly back from Lavan's house to his father Yitzchak, and he has some stops on the way. And along that journey, it says, again, it was when he was dwelling in the land. This is right after Rachel dies. Rachel dies near Beis Lechem, Derech Beis Lechem, and it says, Vayelech Reuven, and Reuven went, Vayishkav es Bilha Pilegesh Aviv. And literally, the most simple translation is he lay with Bilha, the Pilegesh, the concubine of his father. Vayishma Yisrael, and Yisrael Yaakov heard. Vayu b'nei Yaakov shnei masar, and the children of Yaakov were 12. This is a very strange pasuk, a very strange verse. Just like jumping from one to the it was when he was dwelling in the land. And Reuven went. Where'd he go? He lay with Bilhah, the Pilegesh of his father, the concubine of his father. Actually, Bilhah was not a Pilegesh. She was a wife. She was an Isha. She's called that in a number of places. But it calls her a Pilegesh. Vayishma Yisrael, and Yisrael heard. What did he hear? I guess he heard what happened. Vayu b'nei Yaakov shnei masar, and the children of Yaakov were 12. What does that have to do? Like, okay, like that seems out of place. In fact, actually in the Torah, there's like a break before it says that, but it's part of the same verse. So what's going on here? So let's begin with the Gemara, and then we're going to come back and discuss kind of other possible ways to read this verse. So the Gemara says in Shabbos, and this is what Rashi on that pasuk, on that verse, quotes for us, and actually, before we see the Gemara, let me just speak out what Rashi says. So Rashi on that verse says that that Vayishkav es Bilha means not that he lay with her, but he was mivalbel. He changed her bedding. He changed the beds, and it's as if he lay with her. Rashi says since he mixed up the beds, it's as if he lay with her. What does that mean? So why did he mix up? What does it mean he mixed up the beds? Why did he mix up the beds? What does it mean to mix up the beds? So Rashi explains, and we'll see in the Gemara shortly, when Rachel died, Rachel has just passed away, and remember Yaakov has a number of wives. He has Rachel, he has Leah, he has Bilhah. Bilhah is the handmaid of Rachel, who she's given to Yaakov as a wife. And then there's Zilpah, assuming Zilpah's still alive, Zilpah, the handmaid of Leah. So he has 4 wives, and it seemed that he was planning to lie with Bilhah that night. Yaakov was, and Reuven was concerned about this. He was bothered by this, and he took Yaakov's bed, which had previously been in the sorry, Yaakov took his bed, which had previously been in the tent of Rachel, but now that Rachel had passed away, he took his bed and he put it into the tent of Bilhah. Reuven came and he kind of demanded, and he was offended on behalf of his mother, Leah, and he said, it's one thing for my mother's sister to, to lay. It's one thing for Yaakov to keep his bed in Rachel's tent, but in the maidservant's tent, like that's a whole different level of insult. And so he took the bed, and it seems, I guess he took the bed and he moved it to, either messed it up or he moved it. Not so clear what he did exactly, but he did something to prevent Yaakov from laying with Bilhah that night. And then it concludes, though, that the verse goes on, Vayu b'nei Yaakov shnei masar, but the children of Yaakov remain 12, meaning that they were still all equal, that this was not a sin. It's coming to tell you, don't read this verse that Reuven sinned somehow, because the children of Yaakov remained 12, meaning they all remained equal in righteousness, and nobody had sinned. It must be that you need to read the verse in such a way that Reuven did not sin. It's not to be taken literally, perhaps, that he lay with Bilhah, but rather it's tantamount to that he lay with Bilhah because he prevented his father from lying with Bilhah, or something along those lines. What was his concern here? Again, he was either insulted, offended on behalf of his mother. The Ramban says that he was the firstborn, and the firstborn gets a double portion of inheritance. The more children, the more his double portion is impacted. Yes, he gets the most, but in a certain sense, each additional son that Yaakov would have would impact his portion the most, because he has a double portion. So a double percentage is being impacted, each son that Yaakov has. So Reuven, suggests the Ramban, he didn't want Yaakov to have any more sons, so he wanted to prevent Yaakov from laying with Bilhah, which would produce more sons potentially. Why was not concerned with his mother? His mother Leah, the same concern. No, Leah was older already, says the Ramban. That he wasn't concerned about. Zilpah, if he would lie with Zilpah, well, he says maybe Zilpah wasn't alive anymore. He was concerned that Yaakov would have another son, and that would impact his inheritance. And therefore, Mida Kineging Mida, measure for measure, he lost that firstborn right. He lost the chance to have a double inheritance because he got involved where he wasn't supposed to get involved. That's what the Ramban suggests on a simple level. So either, like the Gemara says, like Rashi quotes, he was just offended on behalf of his mother, or the Ramban says he was trying to prevent his father from having more children. Okay, so now let's see what the Gemara actually says. So it's on the source sheet, bottom of page 1. The Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Shmuel bar Nachmani, Amar Rabbi Yonasan, Kol ha'omer Reuven chata eino ela toa. Anybody who says that Reuven sinned is making a mistake. Meaning, if you understand this verse literally, that he committed adultery, that he lay with his, and incest, that he lay with his father's wife, Bilhah, so you are making a mistake. Shenemar, as the verse says, Vayu b'nei Yaakov shnei masar, that the children of Yaakov were 10, the sons of Yaakov were 10, Melamed, teaching Shekulan Shkulam Ke'echad, that they were all still equal in righteousness, and that Reuven did not commit such a sin.
12.
Ella.
Rabbi, 12. You said 10.
Oh, sorry. Whoops. 12. They were the 12 sons. Elamani Mekayim Vayishkabes Bilhah Pilag Shabi. So what does it mean that he lay with Bilhah? Melamed Shebil Bil Matzo Shalaviv. He rearranged, here they say he rearranged his father's bed, meaning I think he moved it from Bilhah's tent to Leah's tent. Umala Labakasov, top of the next page, Ki'ilu Shacharima. But the Torah considers it as if he lay with her. Okay, that needs explanation. Why is it so so terrible that they would consider it that, but that's what the Gemara says how we should understand it. Then it continues and it says, okay, we'll take the time to read it. It's good to just see it, even if we're not going to comment on everything. The Gemara says, Tanya, Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, Mutzal oso tzadik me oso avan. that righteous person was saved from that sin, implying that actually maybe he intended to sin. But it didn't end up occurring, and maybe that's why the verse says it's tantamount that he did, because he intended to, but he didn't in the end. Efshar, how do we know? Because Efshar Zaro Lamod al Har Eval, is it possible that his descendants will later stand on Mount Eval? See, after the Jews enter the land of Israel, they're divided into two groups, and 6 of the tribes are on one mountain, 6 of them are on the other mountain. This is described in the Torah, but it doesn't happen until actually Sefer Yoshua, and he says, how could his descendants stand on Har Eval and say, Arur shochev Eshes Aviv? Cursed is the one who lies with his father's wife. This was the descendants of Reuven on Har Eval, on Mount Eval, saying this. How could it can't be that their own forefather, their own grandfather did this, and they're standing there and saying, cursed be the one who does this. And it's possible that he did this. It can't be that he actually did it. So how do I understand the words, and he lay with Bilhah, his father's concubine, Elbon imotava? What it means is he protested the affront to his mother. Amar, he said, Imachos imi haisatzara leimi. If my mother's sister was a rival wife to my mother, meaning if Rachel was a second wife, fine, that I could deal with. But shivchas achos imite tzara leimi, but her maidservant will now be the rival wife, and Yaakov will kind of give prominence to Bilhah that he couldn't stand. Amado bilbil as matzah. So he went and he got involved and he rearranged the beds. Acherim omrim, others say, shtei matzos bilbil. There were 2 beds that he switched. Achas shel shchina v'achas shel aviv. One belonging to the shchina, to God's presence, and one belonging to his father. What does it mean that he changed the bed of the shchina? Rashi, it's very fascinating. Rashi says on that Gemara that Yaakov actually had another bed, 2 beds in each of his wives' tents. And how would he determine which wife to be with on a given night? It's the one that he sensed the Shekhinah in. If he sensed God's presence in that tent, then that's where he would lie that night. And and he had apparently a bed for that Shekhinah. I can't really explain why, but and Reuven moved that bed as well. And that's what it means. Hainu dichsiv as chilalta yitzui Allah. You then in our parsha you profaned the bedding upon which the one, or you defile the one who went upon the bed, meaning, and it says al tikra yitzui al yitzuai. You could read it in the plural, that he kind of mixed up both the bedding of Yaakov as well as the bed of the Shekhinah. Okay, pause for a second. Chaim Miriam, did you want to chime in?
Thank you, Rabbi. Maybe it's not relevant, but I learned some time ago that both Bilhah and Zilpah are half sisters of Rachel and Leah.
Yeah, right. So I think they would have been you said half sisters, right? Yeah. So right. So it could be that this Gemara doesn't hold that way, because it seems to imply that she wasn't a sister, or maybe since she wasn't a full sister, so he doesn't consider her a sister.
Rabbi, could you elaborate? Pardon me, just real quick. What Chaim Miriam said, I'd never heard that they were half sisters. Where is that written?
Where is it written? I think Rashi even brings it somewhere. The
So they were
Rishonim
half
talk about
sisters
it.
to Leah and Rachel. They were half sisters.
No,
to the father or the mother.
Sorry, Leah and Rachel were full sisters.
Right.
Bilhah and Zilpah were half sisters to Leah and Rachel.
Yeah. Okay.
I think through the father, through Lavan, but I don't remember for sure.
Thank you. All right. Thanks so much.
Okay, now one more thing. the Gemara quotes Kitanai, that actually it's a dispute between Tanaic sages whether Reuven actually committed a sin here. Because it quotes our Parsha, Pachaz kamayim al tosar. So the word pachaz we translate as you were impulsive or restless and like water. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, that it stands that these explanations are going to be that pachaz is actually an acronym. So Rabbi Eliezer says it stands for pazosa chavta zalta, which means pazosa, you were impulsive, chavta, you were liable, zalta, you acted, they say, contemptuously, meaning you like mezalzel, you disgraced. But that doesn't mean that he necessarily committed an act of adultery. That just means he did something impulsive that was wrong. But Rabbi Yeshua says, pasata adas chatasa zanisa. Rabbi Yeshua says, you trampled the law, you sinned, you were promiscuous, zanisa, you were mezaneh, and that means that he committed a sin with Bilah. And then he quotes another opinion, Rabbi Gamliel Omer. Rabbi Gamliel says, pilalta, you prayed, chalta, you trembled, zarcha tfilasecha, your prayer shone forth. That would be that he did teshuvah, he repented, whatever his act was. And then actually the Gemara goes on and brings a couple of other acronyms. But for our purposes, it actually, even though the Gemara quotes the opinion, says anybody who says that Reuven sinned and actually committed adultery is making a mistake, it's actually a dispute between Tanaim, because Rabbi Yeshua does imply to take the verse literally, that he did this. And but again, the main thrust of the sages and of the commentaries is that it's not to be taken literally, or to be taken literally, but to be read in a different way, which is what we'll discuss in a moment. If we take the approach that it's literal and Yaakov and Reuven actually lay with Bilhah, so this is some of the Rishonim who read Pshat, the simple reading, like the Radak, and others. So the Radak explains that first of all, really Bilhah was Yaakov's wife, but the verse refers to her as a Pilegesh, as a concubine, and that's because Reuven thought that she was only a concubine and only a Pilegesh, and a Pilegesh is basically, a concubine is a wife, not a wife. There's no kiddushin. They're not married in the same way. It's someone that the father takes as a to help to produce children, basically, and that's what he thought that she was, and therefore it's easy. There's no like get needed. She is forbidden to other people while she's a Pilegesh, but really just sending her away would be kind of the divorce, and therefore Reuven thought that it's possible she was no longer married to her father, no longer a Pilegesh, and but in fact he was mistaken. She was his wife, and but that would explain his mistake, and therefore he really was forbidden to her, and therefore he was punished. He lost his firstborn rights, and you would read the verse again, like the simple reading, that he lay with her because he thought she was a Pilegesh, he thought she was a concubine. Vayishma Yisrael, and Yaakov heard, Yisrael heard what had happened, and therefore he no longer had relations with Bilhah, and because of that, Vayu b'nei Yaakov Shnei Asar. So therefore, the children of Yaakov remained 12 because he wouldn't have any more children. Because once she was involved in this act with Reuven, then it was forbidden to him really probably to have relations with her after that, and therefore the children of Yaakov remained 12. He was no longer having any children with Leah. Again, possibly like the Ramban said, maybe she was too old at this point, but I think some say at this point he just stopped trying to produce children at all, and that's kind of the simple way to read it. Again, if you understand that, like Rabbi Yeshua, that he did commit this sin, and that reads more easily in the verse. Again, it's still a bit of a strange verse, but that's how it could be read. Yes, Robert.
I just wondering, I mean, there's no discussion about Bilhah's role in all of this. Was she a willing participant, or
Right,
I mean, surely he didn't rape her.
right,
So one would think. So it's very peculiar.
right, right. Yeah. Okay, now what about the other approach? So what's going on in this verse if we take the approach of most of the sages, most of Chazal, that he didn't actually lie with her. So is there any way to read this verse kind of on a pshat level? Again, we could say Vayishkav, it was tantamount to that he did, but actually there are some very creative ways to read this verse that are brought already in the Rishonim and in the Achronim as well, in the earlier medieval commentaries and the later. So in the Paneach Raza, which again is I think one of the later Rishonim, but this is also found in Rabbeinu Ephraim, one of the Bali Tosfos, and he suggests that first of all, what does it mean Vayelech Reuven? And Reuven went. Where did he go? The way the question is asked by the Haksav HaKabbalah, Rabbi Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg, is we don't usually find Vayelech and he went in the context of them having relations. Usually it would be like Vayavo and he came, or Vayakam and he got up. But Vayelech implies going out somewhere, and so what does it mean Vayelech? So and he went. Where did he go? So some of the Rishonim say Paneach Raza, Rabbeinu Ephraim, that he ran away. Vayelech Reuven means he left. He said, "I'm out of here," and he left his father's house. Why? Because Vayishkav es Bilah Pilegesh Aviv. Because his father was Vayishkav es Bilah. His father lay with Bilah, and because you kind of have to break it up. It doesn't read beautifully, but Vayishkav es Bilha, and he lay with Bilah, and who's it referring to? Aviv, his father. His father lay with Bilah. Because of that, Reuven got upset, and that's why he left. Vayelech Reuven, and he left. Now, and then Vayishma Yisrael, Yaakov heard that Reuven had run away, and he went and he said, he sent, he got him back. Vayubnei Yaakov, Shemasar, and then Yaakov once again had 12 sons. But Reuven had left. He said, "I'm out of here. I don't want anything to do with this. If this is what happens in this family," again, you can understand he was upset that Yaakov was with Bilhah instead of with his mother Leah, and he said, "I'm leaving." And Yisrael heard by Shema Yisrael, and then he went and got him by Yu b'nei Yaakov Shnei Masar, and the children of Yaakov were once again 12. And if you understand that way, I think it's actually more understood now why. Again, this reading doesn't say anything about switching the beds. It doesn't fit perfectly with Chazal because it doesn't say anything about switching the beds. But if you understand that this is what happened, and you would read in, I guess, that he also did something with the beds, because you have to explain that, because in our Parsha he's getting rebuked for that. But you understand why he loses the right to the leadership, because if something upsets him and he says, "I'm running away," then he can't be the leader. He can't be the first. He definitely can't be the king. Can't be the priest. He can't be the Kohen. Somebody who's so quick to say, "I'm giving up and I don't want anything to do with this," understandably doesn't have the ability to be a leader. A leader has to be able to ride the waves and deal with something that would upset him. Yes,
Hi.
Mrs. Reuven.
So
Yeah.
yeah, how are you? So anyways, yeah, and that also corresponds to the comment that he's like water rushing.
Right. Exactly. Right. He's quick. He's
Quick,
he's
he runs away,
decisive,
water
impulsive.
rushing. So
Exactly.
that reinforces that comment also.
Thank you. Okay, another way to read it, the Chida quotes that he heard from a rabbi who heard from the Ramah, from Ramosha Isserlis, that you read the verse as follows. Again, where was he going? Vayelech, and Reuven went. So he says that Reuven wanted to prevent Yaakov from having relations with Bilhah, so he went back and forth by the tent of Bilhah, because Vayishkav es Bilhah Pilagesh Aviv, because again, his father wanted to lie with Bilhah, and so therefore Reuven made sure to kind of patrol around, and says the Ramah that it's forbidden to have relations if there's somebody else around. And so he wasn't in the tent, but he was right outside, and he was a thing earshot, and therefore he prevented Yaakov from lying with Bilhah, which was his intent, and Vayishma Yisrael. When it says and Yaakov heard, it means he heard Reuven walking around just outside the tent, and if he could hear him walking around, that means that he's within earshot, and he was not able to have relations with Bilhah, and therefore, Vayu b'nei Yaakov shnei masar. Therefore, the children of Yaakov remained 12. So instead of saying Vayelech Reuven means and Reuven ran away, like the first approach, this one says and Reuven walked. He walked around the tent within earshot, preventing Yaakov from having relations. That's what the Ramah taught. By the way, both of these approaches, what we just said from Rabbeinu Ephraim and from the Ramah, the legend is that Reuven came to them in a dream afterwards and thanked them for vindicating him, for explaining his actions, that he had not sinned, and this is what he had done. Yeah, Robert.
If all he did was walk around and make some noise to provide a distraction, it's not clear why he should be so severely punished. That doesn't seem like
it's a fair question. What does fit better with this is that we can understand Bilbe Yitzue Aviv, he confounded the betting of his father, could mean that he kind of mixed up what was going on. He befuddled them or whatever. He prevented them from having relations. Right. I think again, it depends what his intent was, why he was, but he's getting involved in things that he shouldn't be involved in. And still, yeah, it's a fair question. Why was he so severely punished? Okay, finally, Haksava Kabbalah, Yaakov Tzvi Mecklenburg. Sorry, let me just move on a little bit. He says that he says a different approach. What does it mean, Vayelech Reuven? Vayelech means he went out. He went out to town. Now, what does Vayishkav mean? So Vayishkav, he suggests, could mean, in certain contexts, that he lowered the esteem or the honor of somebody. And right, because Vayishkav means he lay down, but he brings different places where in certain contexts it can mean to like lay a person down, meaning to lower, to degrade them, basically. So the Ksava Kabbalah says that what it means is Vayelech Reuven went out, Vayishkav es Bilhah Pilagesh Aviv. He degraded Bilhah by saying that she was a Pilagesh, that she was a concubine, when really she wasn't. Really, she was a wife of Yaakov, and he degraded her by publicly calling her a concubine, which was a big insult and disgrace for her. And it wasn't true, and he says he thinks this is what it's meant, that he kind of mixed up the betting of his father, meaning he kind of cast aspersions on the relationship, or the nature of the relationship between Yaakov and Bilhah, and that was by calling her a Pilagesh in public. And Yaakov heard what he was saying about Bilhah. That's Vayishma Yisrael, and I guess, yeah, I'm not sure. Actually, he doesn't conclude the thought. What's the and the children of Yaakov were still 12, or were 12. We could probably come up with suggestions, but so that's the Ksava Kabbalah. Vayelch Reuven, and Reuven went. Vayishkav es Bilha Pilegesh Aviv, and he degraded Bilha, the concubine, by calling her the concubine of his father, when really she wasn't. Vayishma Yisrael, and Yaakov heard what he was saying. Okay, so these are different ways that we could read this verse with even though the simple reading would be that he lay with Bilha and committed an ancestral adulterous relationship, but again, the main thrust of in Chazal and the sages is that he did not do that. What he did was maybe tantamount to laying with her, but that what he did was something else. And again, either he ran away or he walked around to prevent them from having relations, or he degraded her in public by calling her a Pilegesh. Those are three suggestions. Reuven he's the firstborn, so it makes sense that we keep kind of encountering him. We encounter him again in Parshas Vayechi, when the brothers are getting ready to deal with Yosef, what they're going to do. And we discussed this a little bit when we learned Parshas Vayechi. So they plan to kill him, to kill Yosef when they see him approaching. And Reuven says, Vayishma Reuven, sorry, first, so that was their plan. Reuven hears, Vayatzileu miyadam, and he saved them. Vayomer lo nakenu nefesh. He says, let's not kill him, let's not strike him. The Sforno says on that verse that when Reuven says let's not kill him, he says by stopping what he calls the sudden act, which creates a situation of me'uvas lo yichol liskon, which is a verse in Koheles, the corrupt or the mistake he can't fix. That they were about to make a mistake that they couldn't fix, the brothers, and Reuven prevented them from kind of acting impulsively and just killing Yosef as he approached. And he says, and the Sforno says, even a tzaddik, even a righteous person falls into that sometimes. Like Reuven with Bilha, like it says, Pachas Kamayim, whatever he did exactly, but it was, the Torah calls it Pachas Kamayim, like he was impulsive like water, he was restless like water. And that's even a righteous person who falls into that sometimes. And Reuven preventing his brothers in this case from acting impulsively and killing Yosef. Now, a few verses later, so he says, let's just throw him in a pit and sell him. Or actually, Yehuda says we should just sell him. A few verses later, Reuven says throw him in a pit. Yehuda says sell him. A few verses later, Reuven comes back, and it says Vayashav Reuven al Abar. Reuven came back to the pit. V'nei en Yosef babar. And Yosef wasn't there, but he crossed Begadav. He tore his clothes. He was very upset. He didn't know what happened to Yosef. Where was Reuven? So Rashi brings two possibilities. Either he wasn't present when Yosef was sold because it was his turn that day to serve his father, so he had gone back to serve his father. Or, says Rashi, he was involved in sako v'tani, sewing his sackcloth, and fasting al bilbul yitzui aviv, for switching the beds of his father. That he was doing teshuvah for that act. Now, why would he be doing teshuvah at this moment? It's random. It's a random time to be there in the middle of dealing with their brother Yosef, and all of a sudden, where's Reuven? He's not here. He's off doing teshuvah. He's off repenting somewhere, and then he comes back, and Yosef's gone. But perhaps, based on the Sforno, we can say that he was inspired or prompted to do teshuvah now for his act when he saw what can come from impulsive decisions. He saw that his brothers were on the spot going to kill their brother, kill Yosef, and he had the sense to stop them, but that really made him realize that quick decisions are often fatal or damaging. And he thought back to his own quick decision that he had made to get involved in his father's personal business and or prevent his father from having more children, whatever it was that he was trying to do. And so it dawns on him at this moment that he also did something wrong, and this is when he decides to go and do tshuva. Perhaps that's why it's at this moment that he goes to do tshuva. Now, just in the final moments or after the final moments, let's come back to our parsha and talk again about the rebuke that Yaakov gives to Reuven. So Yaakov tells him that you're not going to be the Kohen, you're not going to be the king anymore, because pachaz kamayim, because you acted with restlessness, you acting impulsively. So why is the punishment? Why is this the tit for tat, or the midah keneged midah, the measure for measure, for the way that Reuven acted? So the Kli Yakar says that in order to be a king, part of the king's role is to judge the people, and a judge needs patience, basically, and can't act impulsively. I mean, really, a king probably needs that too, beyond just his role as a judge. But this is what the Kli Yakar points out specifically, is that we know from different sources a judge needs matun, to be matun b'din, to kind of have patience before coming to a decision, and part of the role of a king is judging. And because Reuven was impulsive in what he did with switching the bed of his father, so therefore Yaakov saw that he didn't have what it takes to be a king. It's interesting, even though we just said he did tshuva on that, but we find that the shader of Reuven later is once again impulsive in a certain sense. The Akedas Yitzchak points this out, that when the Jewish people are going to be entering the land of Israel, so Reuven is one of the tribes that they see green pastures and they say, we want a portion on this side, and they don't have the patience to go see what's on the other side, that the grass is really greener on the other side. That's Rav Sternbuch points this out. It's based on Midrashim, really, that really they would have gotten an even better portion if they had waited till they got into the land of Israel. But they didn't have that patience. They saw, and they said, we want a side in the Transjordan. We want a portion in the Transjordan. We're happy for this. When what they could have had in the land of Israel itself would have been even greater. So we see this trait remaining in the descendants of Reuven, and in terms of the kahuna, that they lose the rights to the priesthood. So the Kli Yakar says that the role of the priest, the role of the Kohen, is to bring God's presence into the Beis Hamikdash, into the temple. That's Mishkevei Avicha. That's the resting place, the bedding almost of your father in heaven. And just like Reuven, and since Reuven caused the Shechina, caused God's presence to leave the tent of Bilah, so he therefore wouldn't merit to be the one to bring God's presence into the tent of God, into the Mishkan. And that's why it says the Kli Yakar, he lost the priesthood. Okay, so just to summarize what we discussed, again, like I said, it's a complicated and controversial parsha. Probably something that we don't get to delve into too deeply usually. That Yaakov here gives Reuven a rebuke, that because of his impulsiveness, his restlessness, he loses the rights, the firstborn rights of double portion, of priesthood, and of kingship, and it's because of what he did with his father's bedding. We explore different approaches to those verses in Parshas Vayishlach, the Chazal that teach us that he didn't commit an act of adultery with Bilah, but rather what he did was he switched the bed so that so that Yaakov would not lie with Bilhah, would not produce any children with Bilhah. That was an act that was considered impulsive, something that he perhaps did tshuva for later. And the challenge is then trying to read that into the verse. If that's in fact what happened, again, what's prompting in a certain way us to read that way is it says that, and the children of Yaakov were 12, implying they were all equally righteous still, and that he had not sinned. If that's the case, what does it mean that Vayishkav, that he lay with her? We can read it, not that he lay with her, but that Yaakov, Vayishkav es pilegesh aviv, his father, Yaakov, intended to lay with her, and Reuven was trying to interfere with that. And because of that impulsiveness, he loses his ability to have the firstborn and the kahuna and the kingship come from him. Okay.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You are
Yasher
welcome.
Koach.